Hello everyone, it's Jonny Khatru, and in this video it's my first listen to the new EP from Burial called the Antidawn EP. This is the first new release of 2022 I'm covering, and it's the second time I'm covering Burial on the channel. You can see my video covering his last EP, Chemz and Dolphinz, with the link up here. This new EP is a surprisingly lengthy 43 minutes long though, which had us wondering what makes this not a full album. Burial's last actual LP was 2007's Untrue, which is still considered a big favourite amongst Burial fans. And it certainly does contain some of his best music ever for me. But I've also enjoyed plenty of his recent, more ambient works. So I went into this one interested to see how he might expand on this ambient style across a full-length release. The rest of this video will be highlights from my live stream over on Twitch, where I listened to the EP in full for the first time. If you'd like to join me for some full album listening parties, you can follow me over there at twitch.tv/JonnyKhatru. So do me a favor and click the like button on this video, and let's get into the EP. Track 1 is called 𝐒𝐻𝐻𝐵𝐿. This is starting very strong for me. Sounds surprisingly optimistic. He's not letting it settle into one mood. Is that a church organ? This feels like the ending of something, don't you think? A really subtle house beat there, like we're hearing it from a few rooms away. I mean, it's really cool to have Burial not just doing more of the same, like has happened on a few of his more recent releases. You just kind of get no surprises. We definitely got some surprises in that first track. But yeah, I wasn't always impressed with the surprises, you know. They were okay. There was this general layer of familiar sounds, you know, the sounds of lighters, rain, outdoor sounds in an urban metropolis kind of vibe. That's all very familiar. But then the way that he put different things on top of it, vocal samples and different keyboard sounds that would come in and then disappear, set up an atmosphere that only lasts for 20 seconds, 30 seconds, and then moving on to something else on top of the collage of sound effects. I enjoyed a lot of it. The only thing that I wasn't too sure about was that church organ chord sequence, which just felt a little bit overdone. I suppose there were some moments in that song that I would have been happy to hear more of, and that was a moment that I would have been happy to hear less of. This particular edit, you might say, was not as great as I think the track could have been for me, because there were plenty of moments that I did like very much. But yeah, on the whole, just excited to hear that Burial is doing something that we've not heard him do exactly before, and it makes me excited to hear what other interesting new ideas he might have on the rest of this EP. Next one is track 2, and it's the title track, Antidawn.
I've been in a bad place. Nowhere to go. Night has come.
So up until that last minute, I would say that song was much more in line with what we've heard from Burial in the last 5 years or so. And I did really enjoy it texturally, but maybe for me it was a little bit too empty at some moments. It could be that I'm just not quite deep enough into the atmosphere. But yeah, there were lots of nice moments, really enjoyed the textures, but for me, yeah, it was a little bit empty. That being said, in that last minute, there was a really surprising choral moment, which was like a bit of a sun coming up kind of moment. Ironic considering the title. In any case, it was a cool sounding track, a bit more what I would expect from Burial at this point, as opposed to the rather more surprising first track. Track 3 is called Shadow Paradise. Something hymnal about it. Strangely comforting. It's another quite tonally strange song. like the first track. It's like it's comforting, but then it keeps tearing it away from you. Very eerie. Cool. Okay, so that was probably the most interesting track yet for me. It really had some interesting juxtapositions. It was like this dark and eerie underbelly was consistently there through the song, but then these comforting sounds, these inviting moods would rise up and then often just get taken away violently or just fade into the distance and leave you feeling cold and alone. Something like that. I will say that I felt maybe it was a little bit overlong. Might have stretched it out a bit too much, and maybe that lessened its effect a little bit by the end. But for me, it was probably the most compelling track so far. Track 4 is called New Love. More optimistic sounds, which makes sense with the title. So there were some particularly pretty moments in that song. You know, the ending and a couple earlier on. Right at the start of the track was one of the more beautiful moments on the EP. I also felt that that song was the first time I really felt that we're kind of retreading the same ground that he's already covered so far on the EP. It is giving the EP a feeling of being dragged out a little bit for me. Because even though there were some particularly beautiful moments in that song, I also felt that it didn't do anything that previous tracks hadn't already done. And with the length of these tracks, you're listening for a long time and nothing new is happening. That's how I felt. Still some really nice moments. This is the last track, track 5, and it's called Upstairs Flat. Very Vangelis. Whoa. Burial's really letting things grow in this one. That sounds great. Yeah, that was a really satisfying way to close out the EP. That was, I think, the first track where he would build something up and not cruelly rip it away at any point. The mood was allowed to grow and the emotion was allowed to build up inside. A couple tracks on this album probably outstayed their welcome a little bit. And then you have that last song that was the shortest song on the album, and I probably could have enjoyed that one for a little bit longer. So I feel like maybe there's some editing issues on this EP. In retrospect, I can now tell why Burial still considers this an EP, even though it's 45 minutes long. And it's because the number of ideas here is really the amount that you find on an EP. The fact that some of the songs were allowed to stretch up to 10 minutes, 11 minutes was probably not the best move. Although I would say, you know, stuff like Antidawn was probably the biggest offender in that way, you know, really minutes going by with very little happening and the mood not really being strong enough to carry it. So that was an issue for me sometimes through this. And I do wonder if some of these tracks had been a bit more concise and the ideas just given their moment and then allowed to pass, it would have been stronger as an EP. Instead, it was like a long album listening experience, but without enough concepts, enough ideas to really flesh it out to that point. So that let it down a little bit for me. That being said, I do like that Burial was doing a lot of new things here. It definitely wasn't more of the same entirely, which is what could be said about some of his more recent stuff. And yeah, the fact that he had those juxtapositions and this idea of building up an emotion in you and then taking it away or replacing it with something else really suddenly, it was interesting. Burial's still a master of sound design. So many intricacies to really zone in on and enjoy. It was great for that. An interesting Burial EP. and a really cool way to start the year. But yeah, maybe just structurally it could have been a bit stronger. That's the only thing I'll say. So let me know down in the comments what you thought of this EP. If you'd like to see my full unedited reaction to this and so many more albums, check out my Patreon. And I want to say thanks very much to all my current Patreon supporters. You're really helping me to be able to keep making these videos, keep my channels going. I really appreciate it. And thank you very much for watching. Until next time, take it easy.